Hey guys, tonight we stand shoulder to shoulder with a medieval friar in a cold stone-walled friary where the candle sputters and the air is thick with the earthy scent of stored grain. You can almost hear the scurrying of mice, feel the rough wool of your habit itching at your shoulders, and sense the faint, unchanging chill of this endless winter. You are about to begin counting barley grains. Yes, every single grain, in a quest so staggering, so hopelessly tedious, that you probably won't survive this little bedtime adventure with your sanity intact. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd love to know where you're watching from, so post your location and the local time down below. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge through the friary's drafty hallways, each footstep echoing over flagstone, polished by centuries of sandaled feet. The grains you carry weigh down the basket, the coarse twine handles biting into your palms. The friary's bells toll vespers in the distance, reminding you of prayers you barely have time to say, because here you are, given this impossibly simple yet impossible task. Count all the barley brought in for winter. Just barley, you tell yourself. How hard could it be? The answer is immediate, extremely hard. One barley grain is tiny, light as a feather, but put 100,000 together, and they might as well be boulders. As you stoop over the worn table in the counting room, a place usually reserved for scripture, or maybe a bishop's travel log, you wonder why you've been singled out for this ridiculous labor. The prior mumbled something about inventory, stewardship, God's measure, and a record to keep, but you suspect he mostly wanted to keep you busy. Medieval monasteries ran like clockwork, but someone always had to do the thankless tasks, and tonight, that's you. There's a certain joke to be made, you think grimly, about monks having all the time in the world, plenty of time to waste counting seeds. You pour out the first measure of barley from the sack, the grain scattering like golden teardrops across the dark wood. They roll away from you, and you find yourself chasing them with your ink-stained fingers. Your quill sits ready in the ledger, but how could you ever record such a thing? In the 13th century, after all, barley was the staple grain of the poor and the monks alike, baked into rough bread, boiled for weak beer, even ground for animal feed. A single miscount could mean food or famine, survival or death. That's how the friary storehouse looked after harvest, bursting with barley, but still never enough to truly trust. Historians still argue whether barley shipments were taxed heavily in every kingdom or only certain bishoprics, but your own local prior seemed obsessed with keeping every grain accounted for. 1, 2, 3. You start counting aloud, letting the numbers soothe you like a chant. Each tiny oval is rough under your fingertip, a tactile prayer. 4, 5, 6. The barley's husks scratch the skin, almost a penance. Somewhere, someone bangs a pot in the kitchen, and you lose count, swearing softly under your breath. Well, medieval friars weren't exactly perfect saints. You start again, all the while aware that one mistake now could multiply tenfold later. Modern scholars might think your bookkeeping laughably imprecise, but you've never heard of a medieval friar with a calculator, so tough luck. As you count, the fire in the stone hearth smolders low, and the smoke clings to your robe. The cold air flows through the cracks in the walls, turning your breath to mist. You wonder if anyone will relieve you before dawn, but deep down, you know the answer. Nobody else wants this job. It's yours alone, your eternal punishment, or maybe your eternal blessing, depending on how you spin the story. A rat scampers by your foot, making off with a barley kernel before you can swat it away. Even the rodents know how precious this food is, and you wonder how many of these grains will vanish to their nests before spring. You make a mental note to record the loss, then forget, then remember again, cursing the rat under your breath. Another day, another grain thief. That's medieval life for you. You scrape the first counted handful into a separate pot, relieved for the moment to have something solid to point to. I counted these. Only about 100, but it feels like a mountain already. Your back complains from stooping, and your knees creak. They never told you in novice lessons that holy work could feel this mundane. Yet here you are, determined to finish, because you are certain that one day God will look down and say, "Nice work, brother bean counter." I saw that. The grain's earthy smell mingles with wax from your candle, which is drooping like a wilting daisy. You shift closer to the flame, eyes stinging from smoke. The barley shines with a dull golden glow, reminding you of paintings of Christ's halo, except, you know, a lot less inspiring. Still, there is a humble beauty here. Each seed holds a spark of life, a promise of spring's sowing. You think about how barley's been cultivated since at least 10,000 years ago, from the Fertile Crescent to your own damp little country. The history weighs on you, even as your hands fumble with the next measure. A sneeze overtakes you. Barley dust is everywhere, swirling like tiny spirits in the air. You rub your eyes, tears welling up, and almost knock over your counting pot. You steady it just in time. Small victories matter. like those silly tales about medieval love potions made from barley water. Some even believed it could cure heartbreak. You might need a potion yourself after this endless chore. A moment of bleak humor bubbles up inside you. If a medieval friar had to date, would he have enough time between counting grains and saying prayers? Probably not, friend. Probably not. The bells toll again, deeper now, summoning the friars to night prayers. You whisper a quick Ave Maria, just to keep your soul aligned, then dive back into the barley. Numbers blur before your eyes. 1, 2, 3, 100, 101. You wonder how much of this is a test, a measure of your obedience. It's a medieval job, no doubt, but one that someone, someday, will look back on and puzzle over. Did they really count every grain by hand? Historians still argue whether scribes simply weighed barley or truly bothered to tally every piece. Well, tonight, you're the living proof that someone did. At least once. You settle back onto the three-legged stool, which wobbles on the uneven stone floor in a way that should be funny if it weren't so endlessly uncomfortable. Your back protests, but there's no other place to go. The next sack sits to your left, bursting at the seams, its tied cord straining as if it might snap and spill barley to the floor in a biblical flood. You brace your arms, grit your teeth, and haul it closer, the rough cloth scratching your knuckles. The moment you untie it, barley cascades out in a glittering golden river that seems to laugh at you. Sack after sack stands waiting, stacked like a defensive wall against the winter cold. You try to measure out a small handful, but the flow seems unstoppable. The friary steward, you recall, had warned that the harvest had been bountiful this year, bountiful enough to drown a monk's sanity, apparently. As you scoop again, your muscles start to cramp, your arms burning from the repetition. The grain slides through your fingers with a soft hiss, like a dry wave, refusing to be contained. A younger friar might have counted faster, you think, but younger friars had other jobs, copying texts, tending the sick, digging graves. You, lucky you, were chosen for the barley, and you can't even complain. You try to keep a rhythm going. Count, count, count. But every time you get past 100, something breaks your focus. One moment, it's a gust of wind, rattling the monastery's warped shutters. Another, it's the kitchen boys clattering pots. Once, you even hear a rooster crow from somewhere far beyond the friary wall. In the dead of night, that rooster's timing seems like a joke. Only medieval life could play on you. You push on. You push through the aches in your shoulders, through the pinpricks of barley husk dust that creep into your nostrils and make you sneeze. The second sack is only halfway emptied. but you already feel the hours passing. Time moves strangely here, warped by candlelight and the endless repetition of numbers. You remember reading once in the monastery's old scrolls that medieval tally sticks were used in England for tracking debts. Maybe that would be easier than this. One notch equals 100 grains, or 1,000 even. But no, the prior wants a precise count, and the prior's word is second only to God's. Historians still argue whether tally sticks were ever used for food stores as well as debts. But that's not your fight tonight. You try to stretch your fingers, wincing as you flex them. Then you plunge them once more into the barley, repeating your sacred little mantra. 1, 2, 3, 4. Over and over, like a prayer. You wonder if you might just collapse and drown in the grain, like some poor soul in a cautionary tale. There's a fringe story from Italy, you recall, of a merchant's son suffocating in a wheat silo, though no one knows if it truly happened. Medieval rumor traveled faster than truth, after all. Still, you imagine the weight of so many seats pressing you down, and shiver. When you finally get to 1,000, you note it carefully in your ledger, the ink barely drying before you move to the next scoop. The sound of barley trickling is hypnotic, nearly musical. You think of monks singing plainsong and wonder if your barley counting should have its own hymn. If only you had a choir willing to join you in chanting 1, 2, 3, 4, a barley ballad for the ages. A knock on the door breaks your thoughts. Another friar, thin and ghost-like in the low firelight, pokes his head through to tell you that the prior has retired for the night and that you should rest too. You nod politely, but you don't stop. You cannot stop. You fear losing the fragile thread of your count, the single line of numbers that holds you together. That other friar sighs and goes away, no doubt thinking you've gone a little mad. Maybe you have. You scratch another tally into the parchment ledger, though you can hardly read your own cramped script. Medieval ink, you remind yourself, is mostly iron gall, made from oak galls and iron filings, and prone to fading. You silently hope that centuries from now, some scholar won't puzzle over this page and wonder if you had been writing coded messages instead of barley numbers. The next sack is already waiting, a silent threat of your failure. Your arms go numb, your eyes dry out from the dusty air. You shake your head to stay awake. The candle guttering on the table seems to dance with a mischievous spirit, mocking your efforts. You shift, trying to get a better angle, and almost topple your precious pile of counted grains. That moment of panic jolts you awake fully. You think about what the barley will become: bread for the friars, beer for the guests, feed for the sheep. Each grain matters, and that's the only reason you force your hands to keep moving. A rat pokes its head out of the shadow again, bold as a crusader, and you swear softly, throwing a pebble at it. The rat vanishes, unimpressed. You know it will be back, and you wonder if it keeps count of you the way you keep count of barley. Through the small window, a sliver of moonlight pierces the gloom. You watch your own breath fog in the frigid air, wondering if the night will ever end. Winter in these lands is cruel, so cold it cracks the stones, so long it feels like penance. But barley, at least, can survive. That resilience is what you cling to, as if it can somehow pass into you. You pause, blinking the grain dust from your lashes. Then you pick up another handful, and another, until the weight of your own arms feels like penance, too. If you could only finish, if you could only reach the bottom of the sack, maybe you could rest. But as you glance around the counting room, at the mountain of still unopened sacks, you realize with a creeping dread, this could go on for weeks, months, maybe years. Your breath catches in your throat. The enormity of it, the ridiculous, cosmic pointlessness of it, threatens to crack your resolve. But you swallow hard, roll your shoulders, and keep going. Because if you stop now, all these hours will have been for nothing. And if medieval monks are good at anything, it's stubbornness. Your hands tremble as you lift another scoop of barley, the grains prickling your raw skin. You try to ignore the stiff ache in your shoulders, that dull medieval pain no salve can truly ease. Hours have bled into hours, and your mind starts to fray at the edges like a badly woven cloak. It becomes harder to hold on to your numbers, to remember if you've already counted that last scoop, or if you only dreamed you did. 1, 2, 3. Your lips move in a whisper. The barley slides over itself with a faint hiss, the same sound again and again until it's all you can hear, even in your sleep-starved mind. You blink, and for a moment, you can't even recall what day it is. Is it still the same night? Has the bell for lauds rung yet? You listen for it, but the silence is absolute, pressing against you like a weight. Soon the barley piles up around you, small hills of golden brown, until it feels like you're wading through a tiny desert. You brush aside an avalanche of seeds to clear space for your ledger. That quill is your only anchor to reason now, scratching the same loops of numbers over and over. But the ink runs low, and you fumble with the stopper of the tiny bottle, nearly spilling the black fluid across the page. Medieval monks knew how precious an ink was, made by their own hands from oak gall, a substance that could stain fingers for days, and you flinch at the thought of wasting it. You rub your temples, trying to remember how to breathe evenly. The counting room seems to shrink, the stone walls creeping closer. You think of the world outside, beyond the friary, and realize you can't remember the last time you truly walked in the sunlight. Maybe it was autumn before the barley came in. Maybe it was even longer ago. You don't know anymore. Historians still argue whether medieval monks ever took outdoor exercise daily or mostly stayed cloistered. But you, at least, feel like a prisoner of barley. The friary's cook pokes her head in briefly, mumbling about a weak beer made from last year's stores. You manage a tired smile. Barley beer. At least someone will benefit from these endless grains, you think. She offers you a crust of stale bread, and you break it with numb hands, chewing like a sheep might chew dry grass. It is plain, but you are too hungry to care. Another scoop, another 1,000 grains. You fight to keep your eyes open, but each blink grows heavier, as if someone is pulling you into a dream. In that moment, the barley grains begin to look like something else. Tiny skulls, tiny coins, tiny eyes staring up at you. You jerk upright, shaking your head, reminding yourself that barley is just barley. But the flickering candlelight plays tricks on your mind. Somewhere deep in your memory, you recall hearing of a superstition from the far north, where people believed barley could ward off plague if kept under the bed. A fringe idea, perhaps, but anything that gave people hope was worth clinging to in the medieval world. You wonder if you should sneak a handful under your straw mattress, just in case. After all, you've been handling barley for so long, you might as well claim its protection. The hours crawl on, each one longer than the last. Your body is here, but your thoughts wander far from the counting table. You think about the barley fields at harvest, when laborers scythed the stalks in rhythmic sways, humming songs older than any parchment. The smell of cut barley, sweet and green, felt hopeful then. Now, dried and stacked in these sacks, it feels like a burial of that hope. You stand up to stretch, knees popping, and nearly trip over a pile of grain that's crept across the floor. If you ever doubted that barley could move on its own, you'd believe it now. It seems to multiply in the night, rolling, shifting, spreading like a living tide. You kick at it gently, trying to herd it back toward your counting pot, and chuckle under your breath. If barley grains had minds, you think, they'd probably plot to overthrow the entire friary by now. That tiny laugh gives you the courage to keep going. You settle back down and pick up the count once more. 1, 2, 3, over and over, until you think your tongue might forget how to form any other words. You remember something Brother Silas once said in the scriptorium. God counts even the hairs on your head. You wonder if God has the patience to count barley too. Or maybe he left that tedious bit to you, as a kind of divine joke. A gentle sarcasm bubbles up in your thoughts. Lucky you, singled out for holy counting duty, while the rest of the world goes about its normal medieval nonsense, from mending shoes to chasing chickens. You lean on the table for a moment, breathing deeply. The dust rises up in a silent swirl, catching the candlelight like tiny sparks. You think you see a shape there, like an angel, maybe, or a demon. The line blurs when you're this exhausted. Historians still argue whether visions seen by medieval monks were divine, hallucinations, or something in between. All you know is that yours seems to speak through the hush of barley, telling you, keep counting. So you do. With shaking hands, you count another measure and another, ignoring the cramps, ignoring the way your neck locks up. You are Barley's servant now, Barley's humble bookkeeper, Barley's unwilling friend. Your mind drifts again, half asleep, to an image of spring. You imagine those same grains sprouting, growing green in the sunlight, whispering in the wind. You remember what the friary's gardener once told you, that barley can grow even in thin soil, one of the hardiest crops in Europe. Maybe that's what you need to be, hardy, rooted, ready for anything. But that feels impossible tonight, as the next sack waits, looming like a mountain, threatening to tumble over and bury you where you sit. You take another breath, count out another scoop, and press on. You shift on the hard stool, trying to ease the fiery knot in your lower back. The barley grains flow endlessly through your sore hands, a torrent that refuses to shrink, no matter how much you tally. All around you, the room seems to shrink under the creeping weight of stored harvest. The candle flame flickers lower, stuttering in the chill air, like it, too, is losing the will to go on. Through the open door, you hear faint voices, other friars talking in low, conspiratorial tones. They think you can't hear, but the stone walls to carry every word, every laugh. You catch snatches, madness, pointless, Brother Barley. They scoff at you, of course. Who wouldn't? To spend hour after hour counting barley, repeating the same mind-numbing sequence until numbers seem like a fever dream. Only a fool, or a holy fool, could shoulder that. One voice stands out, calmer than the others, as if weighing you like a merchant weighs a half-shaved coin. Maybe he's inspired, you hear someone say. Another scoffs, replying that even the saints never wasted their time this way. It's a little funny, you think, in a grim sort of way. Medieval monks devoted their lives to prayers and discipline, but even they had a limit for absurdity. And you, dear friend, have clearly crossed it. You bend your head, pretending not to listen, but the words worm into your thoughts. You want to defend yourself, to shout that this is God's work, that someone has to mind the barley, that the friary will starve if the count goes wrong. but your voice sticks in your throat, dry and unused. So you just keep counting. 1, 2, 3. Each number a fragile shield against their doubts. You wonder if they're right. Maybe this is pointless. Maybe you are drifting into obsession. But the barley needs counting, and no one else is willing to do it. Historians still argue whether medieval monasteries truly assigned one friar to manage grain stocks alone or rotated the burden, but it doesn't matter in this tiny counting cell. Here, you stand alone. Your mind begins to twist around their gossip, replaying it over and over until even your sacred numbers feel poisoned. You fight to hold on to your focus, to your rhythm. The barley feels heavier somehow, as if each grain has been cursed by your brother's doubts. A barley husk catches on your thumbnail and tears it. A sting of pain so sharp, you hiss through your teeth. You put the bleeding thumb to your lips, tasting iron. There, something real, something human to remind you of flesh and blood. You wrap a strip of rag around it, medieval first aid at its clumsy best, and return to the grain. You picture the friars who taunt you sitting comfortably in the refectory, sipping thin broth, maybe gossiping about your silly mission. Maybe you'll get the last laugh if the prior praises your diligence in the end. That hope gives you a strange, grim satisfaction. As you scoop another measure, you try to imagine the grain as gold, each one a tiny coin of salvation. There are records you once read of how the Templars used barley as a trade good, exchanging it for goods on their travels to the Holy Land. Some believed barley symbolized rebirth, a humble grain that grew where wheat would not. A fitting symbol for your own grim little rebirth, perhaps, turning from a quiet, unremarkable friar to a barley-counting legend. Still, it is hard to drown out the snickers from the hallway. The walls themselves seem to echo with their laughter. You try to joke to yourself that at least they aren't throwing rotten eggs at you. Yet, you close your eyes just for a second, letting the candle's glow burn soft red through your eyelids. You imagine a giant barley monster rising from the counting pots to gobble all the scoffing friars in one bite. A silly image, but it brings a tiny smile to your lips. The scrape of boots makes you flinch. Another friar pokes his head in, this one younger, kinder. He leaves you a small cup of broth, steaming faintly in the cold air, and slips away without a word. You clutch it in both hands, the warmth reminding you that you are still, in some small way, cared for. You sip, then return to the barley, renewed for a moment. You see how the grains catch the candlelight, each one a speck of promise. You allow yourself to believe that what you're doing matters, even if no one else agrees. In your mind, you return to the fields again. You picture those waves of barley under a summer sun, swaying with wind, alive and free. These tiny seeds in your hands hold that memory if you look close enough. They are not dead, they are only sleeping, a kind of hope tucked away for spring. That hope is yours, too, if you can hold on. The voices outside finally fade. Perhaps the friars have grown bored of mocking you, or perhaps they simply cannot understand. You cannot blame them, really. Who would envy this tedious task? Yet still, you cling to it, stubborn as a mule. Medieval monks were famous for stubbornness, and you are no exception. You count on grains slipping through your fingers like tiny messengers of patience. You wonder if you will ever be finished. Another sack waits, tied with rough twine, daring you to measure it next. You sigh, flex your hands, and move on. Your mind is tired, your heart heavier than your habit, but something inside you refuses to quit. You remember Brother Silas's words about obedience being the highest sacrifice. Maybe that is all this is, a test, and so you will pass it, even if the other friars laugh, even if your thumb bleeds again, even if your body breaks and your mind cracks. 1, 2, 3, you whisper, and you go on. You lean forward, eyes half lidded, candle smoke stinging your nose as you count another small heap of barley. The grains seem to multiply in the darkness, shifting and rolling like mischievous sprites bent on driving you insane. Somewhere deep in your chest, you feel a hollow ache, not only of hunger or exhaustion, but of doubt. Why do you keep doing this? What is the real purpose behind so much barley, so many numbers? You close your eyes, letting the hush of the friary surround you. Your heartbeat thrums in your ears like a quiet drum. You force yourself to remember that every grain matters, that every soul deserves a measure. Medieval charity, you remind yourself, runs on the backs of humble tasks like this. Food measured wrong could mean an empty bowl for a peasant come spring. That thought, at least, steadies you for a moment. You murmur a quick prayer, though the words taste dry in your mouth. The prayers feel heavier these days, weighed down by your own weary bones. You wonder if God grows tired of hearing the same petitions over and over, much like you grow tired of the same barley under your fingertips. Historians still argue whether monastic prayers changed daily or rotated in set cycles, but you suspect that for many friars, it all blurs together eventually. Your counting seems to blur too. You rub your eyes, staring at the same husks you've seen for endless hours. Maybe you'll dream of barley tonight. Barley grains raining from heaven. Barley filling your shoes. Barley in your soup. The image nearly makes you laugh, the way medieval humor sometimes leans a little absurd. A friar might even compose a cheeky verse about barley as the devil's confetti. if only to keep from crying. You shift again, letting your knees pop as you stand to fetch another scoop. Your robe tangles under your feet, and you nearly trip, barley spilling like coins from a torn purse. You swear softly, then catch yourself. No sense bringing a curse down on this already cursed mission. The floor is cold stone under your bare toes, a cruel reminder of winter's bite. You shuffle forward to fetch more barley, arms shaking with each new measure. The dust clings to your throat, catching every breath. You cough, the sound echoing off the low ceiling. Then you notice a group of pilgrims appearing at the doorway like wraiths. Their cloaks are travel-stained, their boots crusted with mud, and their eyes, wide at the sight of you, hunched over a pile of barley. You straighten, wiping a streak of ink from your cheek, trying to look a little less, well, barley crazed. One steps forward, a woman whose face is lined by sun and hardship. She gestures toward the barley. "Is it true?" she asks, voice cracking, "that you count every grain?" You nod, embarrassed, but you sense her awe. The pilgrims seem oddly moved, like you've revealed some miracle. Another drops a small silver coin on the table, mumbling a blessing. You realize, with a strange thrill, that they think you're performing a holy ritual. In medieval minds, counting so thoroughly must seem like divine precision, a promise of God's fairness in feeding every soul. You fight back a laugh. If only they knew how mundane, how painfully human it really is. Still, you accept the coin with a nod. Their faith, however misguided, gives you a little spark of energy. The pilgrims leave, offering you another prayer, and you return to your barley with a sigh. Maybe there is something higher in this. After all, even if you can't see it clearly, a simple monk measuring out grain to the last seed could stand for justice, for the careful providence of God. Medieval superstition or not, the thought soothes you. As the night deepens, you notice the candle burning shorter and shorter. Wax drips like slow tears onto the rough wood. You catch yourself nodding forward, forehead almost bumping the grain. You jerk awake, blinking, forcing your mind back to the numbers. Somewhere, a wolf howls beyond the friary walls, a sound that prickles your skin. You imagine its yellow eyes watching from the edge of the dark forest, waiting for a friar too tired to close the gate. Wolves were a real threat in these parts, after all, though they rarely dared the cloister's light. Historians still argue whether they attacked livestock more in winter or summer, but you would rather they stayed far from your barley either way. You draw the cross on your chest, mumbling a prayer for protection, then force your attention back to your tiny kingdom of barley. Your hands slip on a fresh scoop, and a cascade of grain nearly buries the ledger. You scramble to save the parchment, ink smearing where your fingers grab too hard. The panic is like a bucket of cold water, shocking you awake. You slow your breath, steady your thoughts. There is nothing more important in this moment than these seeds. The friary depends on them. The poor depend on them. Even the future depends on them. You try to believe this fully, to push away the doubt. Another memory surfaces. Brother Silas telling you about a monk who once spent an entire winter copying a single book of Psalms, letter by letter, line by line. So perfect, it was said, angels guided his pen. You wonder if barley might be guiding you now, in its own dumb, dusty way. You manage a faint grin. Angels and barley. Two things you'd never have put together before tonight. But stranger things have happened in medieval times. There were monks who claimed to levitate, after all, though whether they did, historians still argue. You count on. Your hands ache, but there's something comforting in the ritual. It is a prayer of the body, if not the lips, and maybe that is enough. Your fingertips brush across another mound of barley, warm from the press of your hands, cool where the night air kisses it. You shift in your seat, muscles sore from hours of repeating the same steady rhythm. By now, the barley has become something more than grain. It feels almost alive, a shifting ocean of tiny seeds waiting to swallow you whole. You pause to sip a bit of water, the taste flat but welcome. As you set the wooden cup down, you hear shuffling in the hallway again, footsteps, slower this time, hesitant. When you look up, you see a line of strangers approaching the counting table, curiosity written plainly on their faces. They're pilgrims, travelers from far corners of the kingdom, carrying all the dust and stories of the roads on their cloaks. One carries a staff adorned with a scallop shell, a sign that he's come from a far pilgrimage, perhaps even Santiago de Compostela, if the rumors were true. Another holds a small leather pouch, fingers white-knuckled around it as if afraid to let go. You meet their eyes, wary, but they only bow slightly, then watch in silent awe as you count grain after grain. It's comical, in a gentle, medieval kind of way, to think anyone could be so entranced by barley. But for them, you realize, this counting is something otherworldly, a sign of God's meticulous love and order, proof that no soul and no barley grain is forgotten. One pilgrim, an older man with a ragged gray beard, asks in a cracked voice if he might leave a copper coin in hopes of a blessing. You hesitate, then nod, tracing a cross over his weather-beaten forehead. He bows so deeply you think he might fall over. As he leaves, he whispers, "May God count me as carefully as you count these grains." You chuckle softly, warmth blooming in your chest. The pilgrims drift away one by one, their footsteps echoing in the hall. Their faith, naive though it is, gives your numb soul a flicker of purpose. Maybe there is something good in this endless counting. You turn back to the ledger, quill trembling from cold and exhaustion, and scratch out another line of numbers. The candle has burned lower, its flame flickering like a dying heartbeat. But you refuse to stop, even as the chill seeps deeper into your bones. The barley keeps coming, scooped from sack after sack. Your arms feel like lumps of lead, every movement a strain. Still, you press on, convinced, no, determined that every measure matters. A sudden gust rattles the shutters, and the candle nearly snuffs out. You jump, barley scattering across the table in a clattering avalanche. You steady the flame with a cupped hand, breathing hard. The grains roll to the floor, lost in shadow. You sigh, bend down, and begin gathering them one by one. There is no barley left behind. As you work, you remember a rumor from the nearby village. Some folks claim the friars used barley water, mixed with herbs, as a medieval cure for stomach worms. You wonder if you'll need a good dose of that yourself after inhaling so much barley dust. You stifle a sneeze, then grin at the thought. Medieval remedies, never boring at least. Historians still argue whether barley water was truly effective or just a peasant's wishful thinking, but a little hope was often better than nothing in these grim winters. You push back to your feet, stretching your spine until it cracks like an old door hinge. The thought of bed nearly makes you weep, but you know you can't stop yet. There are still too many sacks, too many hungry mouths to answer for. Outside, the wind howls low through the cloister arches, like some lonely ghost prowling the night. You pull your robe tighter around your shoulders and hunch back over the barley. A voice at the doorway interrupts your focus. It's a merchant of all people, draped in a cloak far too fine for these halls. He sets down a leather purse with a soft clink and watches you count with a keen, hungry stare. You get the sense he sees only profit in those grains, not their holy purpose. You force a polite nod, but keep your eyes on the barley. Let him see you work. Let him see how sacred this counting really is. He clears his throat, dropping a few more coins on the table. Say a blessing for a good market, will you? He asks, almost sheepish. You bite back a wry laugh. Everyone wants a miracle, even merchants. You trace another cross, whisper a quick prayer, then turn back to the barley. When he leaves, you glance down at the coins. It's enough to buy candles for a week or feed a few poor souls who wander to the friary gates. That thought soothes you. Maybe this barley is more than just barley after all. Maybe it is hope, measured out one grain at a time. You count again, lips moving softly. Your voice is hoarse but steady. 1, 2, 3, 4. Each number threads through your mind like a rosary bead, over and over. In the silence that follows, you sense something shift in your heart, a strange calm, like cool water flowing over your worry. Perhaps you can finish this, no matter how long it takes. The barley will wait for you, and you will wait for spring, and together you will see it through. You rub the sleep from your eyes, blinking hard, fighting the heavy pull of exhaustion. Another candle has burned itself down to a puddle of wax, leaving behind the sharp, sour scent of old tallow. You try to shift your shoulders, to unknot the ropes of tension wound around your spine, but the barley doesn't care. It spills across the table, insistent, infinite, demanding every sliver of your attention. You dip your quill in the inkwell once more, though the ink is half clotted from neglect. Your ledger is a mess now, pages smudged by barley husk dust and your own clumsy fingers. The columns of numbers blur together, and for a heartbeat, you forget if you last marked 2000 or 3. A jolt of panic scrapes down your neck. You check, recheck, then count it again, because your mind is so frayed you barely trust it to hold a single thought. A cough rattles from your chest, the dry kind that stings your throat and tastes of smoke. You wave a hand to scatter the barley dust, but it lingers in the air, swirling like golden ghosts, settling in every crease of your robe. You imagine barley climbing up to your nose, your mouth, until you breathe barley and dream barley and become barley. It's a ridiculous picture, and you snort a laugh, a brief spark of humor in this grim routine. You lean forward to read the next number. Candlelight swimming across the parchment. The ink is nearly gone, scraped thin. Medieval friars often had to make their own supplies, from scraping vellum to brewing their own ink. You remember helping Brother Silas collect oak galls for a new batch. Your fingers stain dark for days. Historians still argue whether monks shared their ink recipes freely or guarded them like secret treasure. But tonight, you wish you had another pot, because this one is dying as surely as your candle. The barley clatters in the pot again, a sound you're sure you'll hear even in your grave. The endless dribble of tiny grains makes you think of sand in an hourglass. Slow, steady, unstoppable. Time itself seems to stretch out, and you wonder if you will measure not only barley, but all the years of your life this way. A sudden cough from the hallway startles you. Another friar, stooped and pale, appears at the doorway, his eyes sunken with worry. "Brother," he rasps, "you should rest." You want to answer, truly you do, but your tongue feels heavy. You simply nod, then turn back to your barley. The other friar watches you for a moment, a ghost of pity on his face, before shuffling away. You feel his eyes even after he's gone, a prickling on your skin, like a question you cannot answer. You brush aside another pile of grain, finding a half-dead beetle buried inside it. With a sigh, you scoop the insect up and toss it away. The barley deserves better than rot, you tell yourself, and you wonder how many more tiny lives might hide in the mountains of seed. You remember hearing that some medieval farmers mixed crocodile dung into their grain stores to ward off pests. Hard to say whether that was smart or just desperate, but you'd trade your candle for a pinch of it if it kept these beetles away. As you stir the barley once more, your eyes catch on a strange ripple of shadow on the ledger. It almost looks like a face, drawn in the spilled ink and barley dust, a hollow-eyed, silent witness to your ceaseless count. You blink hard, but it does not go away. Hallucination or a sign? Historians still argue whether medieval monks' visions were true miracles or products of sleepless minds. But to you, it feels unsettlingly real. You shiver, pull your rope tighter, and focus back on the numbers. Numbers are safe. Numbers are honest. Numbers do not change on you when your mind falters. You whisper them softly, like a lullaby. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Over and over, a rhythm that comforts you even as it enslaves you. A sudden spark of fear grips you. What if you lose count entirely? What if you have to begin again from the very first grain? The terror tastes cold on your tongue, an icy panic that almost makes you retch. You push it away with sheer will, refusing to let go of your hard-earned tally. Another measure, another scoop. Your muscles scream with every movement. You dip the quill once more, scratch a faint line. Pray it is correct. You dare not even blink too long, lest your brain betray you. The barley itself seems to lean toward you, daring you to fail. Its tiny husks bristle like a hedgehog, each one demanding recognition, a place in your sacred count. You remember how in parts of Germany, barley was considered a grain, blessed by Saint Walpurga herself, protecting barns and pantries from witchcraft. Maybe you could use a blessing right now, you think, a smile tugging at your cracked lips. You count on, steady as a monk's bell, until your wrist nearly locks in place. You flex your fingers, pain shooting up your arm, then force them back to the barley. You cannot quit, not now. The candle guttered, a tired flame nearly spent. You catch your own reflection in the pool of wax, a face lined with shadows, eyes so tired they look bruised. For a heartbeat, you barely recognize yourself, but the barley is still there, faithful, infinite, waiting for you. You breathe deep, pull the next measure toward you, and continue. The night is colder now, cold enough that you can feel it through the soles of your sandals, biting up through the stone floor until your toes burn with the chill. You shiver inside your robe, the scratchy wool, no match for the winter, pressing in from every crack of this centuries-old friary. A gust rattles the shutters again, and for a moment you almost hear a voice in it, whispering in a language too old to remember. You steady your hands, cradling a fresh scoop of barley, forcing your mind to hold the numbers. It feels like you are balancing your entire soul on a single fragile count. Outside, you sense the snow falling, though you can't see it. The hush is too deep, too complete, the world wrapped in a thick blanket of white. Your candle is nearly spent, a stub that barely fights back the darkness. You glance around for another, but the shelf is bare. With a sigh, you shield the guttering flame with your palm and press on. In the soft light, the barley grains seem to glow, like tiny amber gems, each one a reminder of life's stubborn spark. You wonder, as you often do now, why you alone must count them. Surely the other friars could help, but they are busy tending prayers, patching the roof, chopping firewood, minding the guests. Your task is yours alone, and you cling to it with the same grim resolve that you might cling to a final breath. Historians still argue whether medieval friars specialized their labors so strictly, or whether they shared every chore. But you know in this moment that you are very, very alone. You cough again, barley dust catching in your throat like ground glass. You take another small sip of water, swirl it around, spit it back into a clay bowl darkened with old stains. The water tastes of stone and candle smoke. Still, it helps clear your throat enough to let you count again. Another measure, another 100. Your fingers, so stiff you can barely bend them, press each grain down. You have lost track of how many hours you've sat here. Maybe a day has passed, maybe more. The night is endless. Time itself seems broken. A sudden thump at the far end of the room startles you. You whip around, breath frozen in your chest, eyes straining into the gloom. For a moment, you think you see movement, something large, something wrong. Then you realize it's only the wind shifting the stacked sacks, making them sway like giants. You laugh shakily, wiping a tear from your eye. You probably won't survive this, you whisper to yourself with a rueful smile, echoing that first moment you began. You chuckle again, half crazed, half hopeful, because laughter is the only weapon you have left against the crushing monotony. Your feet feel numb now, the cold turning them to lumps of stone. You try to wriggle your toes, but they barely respond. You picture frost creeping over them like medieval ironwork and make a joke in your head about holy relics. Brother's frozen toes, third-class relic. If you don't laugh, you'll break. You push your ledger closer, peering at the cramped numbers. The ink is faint, smeared in places by your own clumsy hands. The quill is worn nearly to the nub. You roll it between your fingers, wondering how many monks before you had counted anything so carefully. There were tales of medieval scribes going blind, squinting for decades at tiny letters. You feel a kinship with them now. The barley is your book, its numbers your prayers. You reach for another scoop, but your arms protest, muscles spasming from overuse. You grit your teeth and force them on, because you cannot, will not, lose count. The wind whistles again, louder now, and snow swirls under the door like a ghostly mist. You stamp your feet, trying to keep your blood moving, and wrap your robe tighter. You remember an old friar telling you once that barley stores must be guarded like gold in winter, when hunger could drive even good men to steal. Historians still argue whether most monasteries kept guards in their granaries or simply trusted God to protect them. You suspect a bit of both. You draw the sign of the cross in the barley, almost without thinking, as if blessing it against thieves, rats, and even the cold itself. The gesture calms you for a moment, and you breathe a little easier. Your thoughts wander again, slipping through the cracks of fatigue. You imagine spring, green shoots breaking through thawed earth, lambs bleating, bees bumbling lazily from flower to flower. You wonder if you'll even see it, if you'll finish before then. A soft smile finds your lips, because hope, like barley, endures. Another scoop, another count. You move as if in a trance, letting the number wash over you, a litany of survival. A crack in the shutter lets in a thin blade of moonlight, silver and cold. You watch it crawl across the barley, turning it to something otherworldly, almost magical. You imagine you're counting stars instead of seeds, and for a moment you feel the dizzy awe of the universe pressing close, whispering that every tiny thing matters. Your hands are so cold you can barely feel the barley anymore, but you go on. There is no other choice. The world outside is locked in winter's grip, but in here, in this tiny chamber, with your candle stub and your ledger, there is purpose. So you count, number rolling off your tongue like a soft hymn, warming you better than any fire. 1, 2, 3, always one more. Your voice is hoarse now, every syllable of each number catching in your raw throat. The chill is so deep, it has become part of you, woven into your flesh like the threads of your coarse robe. You shift again on the rickety stool, which creaks a pitiful complaint, as if even it is tired of this ceaseless ritual. Outside, the storm beats at the monastery walls, wind rattling the shutters with a force that makes you glance up each time, half expecting them to burst inward. But they hold, and you return to your barley. Always, always the barley. A new measure lies before you, and you force your cracked fingers to work. One grain, then the next, and the next. You barely notice the rhythm anymore, but it hums through you like a heartbeat, unstoppable. Your mind tries to wander, to escape, but the numbers drag it back. Then the visions begin. At first, just shapes in the corner of your eyes, shadowy, half-formed. You blink, and they vanish. But when you let your gaze soften, exhausted beyond sense, they return. You see them dancing between the candle's glow and the sacks stacked high against the wall. Tall, pale figures with wild green crowns, hands of stalks, eyes of barley grains. Harvest spirits may be, born of your mind or something older, you cannot tell. They step lightly through the mounds of grain, whispering in voices that crackle like dry husks. You shudder, gooseflesh rising on your arms. Are they demons? Saints? Hallucinations? Historians still argue whether medieval visions were inspired by faith, hunger, or fungus in bad bread. But here, in this lonely counting chamber, they feel real enough to freeze you where you sit. One spirit leans close, the rustle of its straw-sleeved arm brushing against your cheek. You taste barley on the air, impossibly sweet and bitter at once. It does not speak words, but you understand all the same. Count well, little brother. Count well, or we vanish. You want to argue, to cry out that you cannot keep going, that your hands are broken, your mind torn. But your lips move only with the numbers, because to stop now would be to break a promise you cannot even name. A moth flutters against the flame, nearly putting it out. You swat it away, heart pounding, breathing hard. You realize you are shaking, eyes wide, mouth dry. The spirits fade for a moment, slipping back into the shadows, and you sag forward, resting your head on the edge of the barley pot. It is cool and solid, real in a way the visions are not. You cling to that. You must. Your thoughts slip again. You see the barley fields of summer, gold under a sun so bright you can hardly remember its warmth. You see the reapers, swinging their blades, singing their rough harvest songs. You remember one line, grain for the bellies, grain for the beer, grain for the holy bread. You smile, a soft, broken thing. That grain now sits in front of you, helpless under your endless count, waiting for its chance at new life. The room seems to spin a little, the shadows stretching and bending like dancers in a festival. The harvest spirits return, closer this time, eyes glowing like tiny lanterns. They circle you, their barley-crowned heads nodding in rhythm to your whispered numbers. 1, 2, 3. They hum with you, a low, droning chorus, and you think maybe you have lost your mind. Maybe that is all right. Medieval monks, after all, were known to chase visions. Why not you? One spirit reaches out, touching the ledger. Its hand leaves no mark, yet the ink seems to darken, the numbers clearer for a moment. You blink, stunned, then remember to breathe. A sudden draft makes you gasp, so cold it cuts your lungs. The candle flickers dangerously low, and for a moment you are sure it will go out. You protect it with your palm, the light fragile as your faith. Through the howling wind, you hear what might be singing, distant and wordless, as if the fields themselves call you home. You swallow hard, throat raw, eyes burning. The barley stares back at you, patient and merciless. You dip your quill again, though the ink is thick and gritty. The harvest spirits wait, silent now, watching, expecting. You give them what they want. One more count, one more line on the ledger. You wonder if these spirits are protectors, guardians of the harvest, making sure not a grain is wasted. Or maybe they are born of barley itself, refusing to let you rest until you finish. Historians still argue whether medieval folk truly believed grain had a spirit, or if that was just poets' talk. In this moment, you believe it. The fire in the hearth has died to coals, barely any glow left. The shadows grow bolder, pressing in until the little candle is all that stands between you and utter night. The harvest spirits dance around it, heads bowing as if in prayer. You bow too. You cannot help yourself. 1, 2, 3. You count until your voice breaks, until your vision blurs, until your hands freeze halfway through a scoop. The harvest spirits fade, one by one, melting into the gloom. You are alone again, alone with the barley and your numbers and the endless, endless winter. The dark is total now, broken only by the faintest ember of your dying candle, a fragile dot of light in the crushing black. You can hardly feel your own hands anymore, as though they belong to another man, some medieval penitent doomed to weigh every breath, every grain, until time itself fell apart. You shift stiffly on your stool, bones aching, body locked in the same hunched shape for hours. Or was it days? The barley before you seems endless, rolling out of the sacks like the sea. It is a sea you will drown in, grain by grain. Your breath rattles in the silent chamber, frost swirling from your lips. You gather a fresh measure, palms numb and cracked, and whisper the next count. Numbers slip through your mind like threads, fraying at the edges, refusing to be tied down. You cling to them anyway, because they are all you have left. The harvest spirits are gone now. Only the faint hush of wind beyond the walls keeps you company, a wind so cold it could flay the skin from your bones if you let it in. You pull your robe tighter, though it does no good. You remember, suddenly, the friary's bell, silent now in its tower, its rope stiff with ice. Once, it rang to summon you to prayers, to meals, to rest. Now it feels like a ghost itself, forgotten. Historians still argue whether medieval bells were rung in the deepest winter, or if silence marked those deadly months. Either way, you feel forgotten too, alone in your barley prison. A joke crosses your mind, a pitiful one. If you counted all the barley in Christendom, would God Himself clap for you? You stifle a laugh, afraid you might not stop once you start. Another measure, another 1,000. Your hands move automatically, muscle memory dragging you along. The barley hushes under your fingertips, a soft, conspiratorial sound. You swear it murmurs to you now, like an old friend. Stay awake, it seems to say. Stay counting. You bow your head, exhausted. Sleep tempts you, heavy as a wool cloak after rain. But you dare not give in. You fear you would wake with no memory of your tally, no hope of reclaiming it, lost in the swirl of dream and nightmare. So you keep going. Your ledger is a ruin. The ink smeared, the numbers crossed and recrossed, barley husks stuck to the wet blots like strange medieval runes. You wonder if some future scholar might puzzle over this parchment, centuries from now, guessing it to be a spell. Well, perhaps it is, a spell of patience, of endless stubbornness. A knock at the door startles you. You look up, blinking through a haze of half-sleep. A friar stands there, holding a new candle, eyes soft with pity. He says nothing, only sets it down beside you and leaves again. You want to weep with gratitude. You light the fresh candle, its flame steady and strong, and it feels like mercy itself. You warm your hands near it, then return to the barley with a deep sigh. The flame throws new light over the grain, and you see again its quiet beauty. Each seed a tiny, perfect miracle. This humble grain that fed whole kingdoms, brewed their ale, lined their monastery gardens. It is more precious than gold when hunger comes, and you are its guardian. You straighten your back, if only for a moment. You breathe in the dusty, grassy scent. You remember how, as a child, you thought barley was boring, coarse peasant food. Now you see it for what it truly is. The backbone of life, patient and plain and enduring. Another scoop, another prayer, another count, and in that moment, something shifts inside you. A strange calm, a surrender. You realize you may never finish this count. You may die here, hunched over the barley like a miser with his coin. And oddly, that feels all right, because someone will take your place. Someone will finish, or maybe no one will, and the barley will simply go on, year after year, spilling from sack to sack, measured by memory and faith and human hands. Historians still argue whether any medieval friar truly finished such a colossal tally. But here, in this chamber, you know the truth. It is the trying that matters, the attempt, the discipline, the impossible hope. You whisper the numbers again, a lullaby to yourself, each syllable a heartbeat, a prayer. The barley listens. The snow outside thickens, piling against the walls, pressing in. Spring feels impossibly far away, but the barley will wait, sleeping in its sacks, dreaming of sun in green fields and the day when it will rise again. So you count, so you breathe, so you remain. 1, 2, 3. Always one more. And now, dear friend, let your shoulders finally soften. The night outside has grown so quiet, as though even the wind has tired of its rattling games, leaving only a gentle hush for you to rest within. You can feel the tiny warmth of the candle still flickering, its glow steady and sure, bathing the barley in a golden calm. Breathe slowly, deeper than you have all evening, letting the ache slip out from your bones with every exhale. The grains that seemed so heavy, so endless, now feel light as feathers in your thoughts, drifting away, peaceful and harmless. Let your eyes close and let the numbers fade, knowing they will wait for you if ever you wish to return. There is no rush, no punishment, only the soft passage of time itself, carrying you toward a gentle sleep. Picture the barley fields in spring, soft green shoots waving in warm breezes, and know they will come back again, as they always do, in their own perfect season. You have done enough, you have carried enough, and now there is nothing more to weigh you down. Drift, then, into the long night, held by the hush of the grain, the faint hum of quiet prayers, and the easy rise and fall of your own breathing. Sleep, peaceful and safe, through the winter hours until the dawn comes to find you.